Greetings and welcome to episode 55 of the Sustaining the Herd podcast brought to you by Agri-Services and Engineering of Raymond, Nebraska. I'm your host, Andrew Wadle, and I'm joined in the studio with my co-host, Brock Vitek.
Hey there, Andrew.
Hey, Brock. And we're also joined in the studio today with our very special guest, Jimmy Hagge of Hutchinson and Associates of Grand Island, Nebraska.
How are you guys doing today?
We're doing great, Jimmy. We really appreciate you joining us, and we're gonna learn more about Jimmy here in just a moment. But just a few things just to talk about as we normally lead off episodes. We wanted to really welcome back our returning listeners. We really appreciate you joining us again today. We appreciate the feedback that you give us, and that we want to continue to deliver really meaningful content when it comes to all things involving sustainability in agriculture, with kind of like our specialty of sustainability in animal agriculture. But as we all know, sustainability takes on a lot of different meanings to a lot of different people. Here at Agri-Services and Engineering, we kind of put it into three buckets, and the bucket number one would be really maybe the more traditional view of sustainability, and that would be clean air and clean water. We want to keep the contaminants, any contaminants, out of the air that we breathe and the water that we drink. So that would be kind of number one. Number two would be resource efficiency. Sustainable businesses do more with less, and agriculture is an absolutely amazing example of resource efficiency, doing more with less, and recycling. Just look at things like milk production, corn yields. You can go on and on and on. We just keep getting better, and we have to keep getting better. And then the last part, and this is going to really just fit right in with what Jimmy is going to talk about today, and that is business sustainability. We have to have strong agribusinesses that want to continue to farm and ranch and milk cows and grow crops. Let them, the people and the businesses that continue to make American agriculture what it is today. So business sustainability is a huge part of sustainability, and oftentimes one that's overlooked. And it's also one that we want to make sure it's not overlooked, and so we talk about it. And so with that, I would like to reintroduce and re-welcome Jimmy Hagge to Sustaining the Herd. And Jimmy, tell us about you and what it is that you do.
So, again, folks, my name is Jimmy Hagge. I'm from Gretna, Nebraska originally, and still live in this great town today. And, my background is I didn't grow up on a family farm. It was more of a hobby farm. My grandfather succeeded by making the American dream by making glasses, but he also grew up on a farm in Jamaica, Iowa as a young boy, and when he achieved financial success, he wanted to get back into farming. So we bought this farm that I grew up on as a little boy in Gretna. I had the opportunity to show lambs and get into horses. And after that, I found a big love for agriculture through my grandparents. And my Uncle Mark, he married into a family out in Orr, Nebraska that had a large ranching operation. And I got the opportunity to spend 6 summers with them out there. And through that, I fell in love with it even more. So when I went to Lincoln, I'm a Husker, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.
Yeah, yes, sir. And I started out with animal science with a minor in ag economics, and thought I wanted to be an embryologist, but with all the organic chemistry and biochem they were asking for, I said, yeah, that's not for me. So I made a switch, and I went into ag business, and I kept my animal science degree as a minor. And my junior year, that was COVID and stuff, and I fell in love with my Finance 260 class, and when I graduated from Lincoln with an ag business and minor animal science, I took my knowledge of ag operations that I've learned in my early years and throughout my internships in college, and I took how can we apply that with finance and wealth management. And from there, now I hold my 7, I hold my 66. I can trade on the stock exchange. I'm a wealth manager. And now I just help farmers and ag operations, help them achieve what they want for their operation. We listen to them, and then we find the tools to guide them to being profitable and sustainable for the future.
That's absolutely great, Jimmy. Thanks for that introduction. To tie it back to one of the last things Andrew mentioned in his introduction, I'd just like to pose the question to you. In your words, what does it mean for an agricultural operation to be sustainable across multiple generations?
Yeah, Andrew said earlier, sustainability for ag operations means so many different things. And in my opinion, sustainable is not just environmental, it's financial, relational, and operational. And, for a farm to still be perfectly productive, it also needs to be, you got to look at things generationally. Right now, when you glance at a farmer's balance sheet, land is their largest single asset, and land is very illiquid. It can't be easily sold, in an event if something bad were to happen. And, you have to look at things, sustainability is for the next generation. Not only are they willing to, but can they afford to take it over? And do they have the skills to take the operation to the next level? Another thing to consider is when you're looking at an operation, what does their debt look like? Can the next generation service the ground? I mean, the average piece of ground you're seeing right now in with row crop farmers is anywhere from 10 to 15,000 an acre. That's a lot of money, compared to the former generation when they got into farming. It was 500 to 1,000 an acre, with prices relatively the same. And now you're seeing prices are still the same, but your input costs are crazy. And so that's something that now has to be considered. Are we sustainable enough for the operation to continue? And what financial tools do we have in place now and tomorrow that are going to help us? And then another thing is you got to consider is non-farming heirs. I mean, they count also. That can put a lot of pressure on a family operation. How can you be fair and equal at the same time? Fair and equal don't mean the same thing.
No,
So
they don't.
they don't. And so you have to have the conversation, and you have to include the non-farming heirs, and everyone needs to voice their opinion. And lastly is culture and identity. You know, there's a lot of people that identify with, some guys are very boastful about how much ground they farm. Some are just silent about it, but there's an identity with that. And sometimes when you're looking at land, and we have dealt that with in my own family, is there is identity with that, and sometimes we can make irrational decisions, and we can't take emotion out of it. So you got to consider all those points, in my opinion, and that's what I think what sustainability on the ag operation means.
Yeah, it sounds like when you're navigating these types of things, you're part financial analyst, and you must be part therapist, part sociologist when it comes to you raise a point that to me is really it must be difficult, and that is the non-farming family members, because I guess at some point people might want a piece of the action, so to speak, but yet
Yeah.
not be farming, and people might want to get out, but I can imagine it must be challenging.
It is, and part of my role as an advisor is you're just a facilitator in those type of meetings. And you come in and you start with an outline, and you let the ones that built the operation talk first. But at the end of the meeting, you have everyone that's involved in the operation, whether they farm and whether they don't, and everyone gets a chance to speak. And what you'll find sometimes is that the ones that aren't farming, they're going to be the ones like, I don't need that big of a share in the operation. I'm not that involved.
Hmm.
And it's just the factor of communicating with one another. That's how, that's what, you can finally just take the weight off your shoulders and go, okay, now we know what to do. Now it's um, walk before we run. Eat, eat an elephant at one bite at a time.
Yeah. What do you do in circumstances where the non-farming entity just wants to get out, and yet there is no real mechanism or capability to satisfy their needs in terms of a payout? I mean, really, that's what you'd be potentially talking about.
Um, you can look at different tools like, um, life insurance. If the farmer or the entity is insurable, the key people are, you can look at rearranging the operational company. You got to bring your attorney in and CPA. And, me, when I'm working with on a farming operation, it's not just me giving the ideas. You got to build a great advisory team. And that is finding advisors that have your best interests at heart and that are team players. And so having a good estate planning attorney, having a good business attorney, having a good CPA, a tax attorney, and together, all of us can brainstorm and bring ideas to you guys on what's the best case scenario for you. Um, it unfortunately is, you know, the best time to plan was 10 years ago,
Yeah.
and the second best time is today. And and unfortunately, you're more in the latter with ag operations. They sometimes start when it's too late, and you just have to cross those hurdles. And that's the big thing is, if you're an ag operation at 2,000 acres that you own free and clear, and let's say you're at 15,000 an acre, that's 30 million. I don't know if you guys follow the state tax exemption, but we're etching up to, I think it's at close to 33 million with inflation. And then you add everything else. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ag operations that have an estate tax problem or they're on the cusp of it. And then you figure out, okay, how do we mitigate this risk? How do we mitigate this problem? Do we gift now or do we transfer later? And those are serious talks that you got to have with one another, because when you gift now, you lose your step up in basis. When you transfer later, your step up in basis stays with you. And so those are things that, as an advisory team, not just me, not just the attorney, and not just the CPA, we all have to either be in the same room or on the same call together to talk about that and see what's the best case scenario for you and your family.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's a couple things that you've said that really resonate with me, and Brock and I Brock and I see it weave through almost every episode, and that is build the team, and it's about the people, and it's about
Mm-hmm.
communicating. The team, the people, the communication, and it's like, how often do we talk about that, Brock? And it's
All the
it's
time.
it's super important.
Yeah, definitely is. Jimmy, as you go into these conversations with clients or prospective clients, what is your goal every time you go in to sit down with people and facilitate this family meeting?
The goal is to hopefully help them realize that there's an issue, and if there's an issue, and then two, how do we start? How can we take the first step? Because I
Yep.
think that's what's the hardest part for a lot of farm families. I think they look at it and they see this monster that they've created and they don't know how to start. They think that they're going to have to run at it. No, we're going to just take one step at a time. And, what I like to do when I get done is I have next steps and action steps. What are we going to do in the next 30 days, the next 60, the next 90 days to get to where we would like to go? And you just take one bite at a time. What's the, green, yellow, red? What's green light is most important. This is what we need to get done first. Yellow, red is usually, 3 to 6 months down the road. And so, and it's a lot of work on our side. We're looking at balance sheets. We're looking at tax returns. We're looking at profit and loss statements. We're seeing how maybe you got a trust done 10 years ago, or has that been stayed up to date? Um, you know, and then we work with, if you have a current attorney that you really like working with, great. If you don't, we come in and we recommend a few attorneys that we think would best suit you and best fit you on a personality scale, and also at where you're at, sitting at financially, and where you're going. And same vice versa um, for your CPA and tax attorney and so forth. And I think for really large operations, when they're truly running it like a business, you know, are they at a point where mom and pop, maybe need to stop doing the books and we need to hire maybe a CFO or a controller or a fractional CFO company to come in and help get the book work a little bit more cleaner, and, truly where we can start helping them figure out their numbers and they can track their break evens a lot better, because that helps us, because then um, we know what's going on. You as an employee of the operation don't see us every day. You might see us come in like quarterly or biannually or annually, depending on the size of the operation. But we're kind of more in the back office, back scene. You don't see us that much. But my job is to work on the operation. I don't work in the operation.
Yep,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Jimmy, as you talk about how you and your team uh, help people, this has reminded me that there's something I think I used to get mixed up, but more recently I've realized, at least I think, that they're two different things, and that would be estate planning and succession planning. I used to think of them as just synonymous with one another, when they're really not, in my opinion, as I've come to realize. And I'm going to give the Brock, not a professional in this stuff like you are, definition, and I want you to set me in the right direction, or maybe expand on it. When I think about estate planning, I think about, this estate planning is who gets what. It is, determining, who gets what land, what assets, what money, you name it. It's more of dividing up or having a plan for assets. Succession planning, in my opinion, is how can this operation be sustained over time? Okay, so we know who gets what, but are they capable of maintaining and or sustaining that asset, that land, that enterprise over time? So it's more of like the who gets what and how do we keep this going? That's my very amateur 30,000 foot view of those two things, but would love to have you dive into the difference. Because I think a lot of people are probably in that camp that I was in not too long ago and just thought of these as the same thing when they're actually not.
No, they're not, but you hit it right on the ball. I mean, estate planning is pretty much the transfer of your assets. And that's the what. The money, the assets, wills, trusts, irrevocable trust, revocable trust, what's going and where. Succession planning that's my thing, that's equally just as important. Who is going to take over the operation? How are you teaching them? What operational skills are you showing them? And are you starting to give them some of the rein? I think what you see a lot of times is you see a lot of operations where um, the next person that's going to be taking over the farm is almost 70 years old, you know, and because grandpa he still has the banking relationship. He's still going in and securing the line of credits every year. And really, it might be dad and son are really operating the farm. they're planning, they're making all this decisions, but grandpa's signing the check. And so that right there, in my opinion, is equally as important as estate planning. And you have to have both. You can't have one and you can't have the other. And, a great estate plan is knowing, hey, these are where the assets are going to go, but they're also not ignoring on who's going to be running the operation when we're no longer here and stuff. And that takes time, and that takes a lot of soul searching, because sometimes who you thought wanted to take over the operation might not want to, and the one that you least expected does.
Yeah. Funny, Brock, the way my Neanderthal brain translates succession planning and estate planning is that succession planning is for when the lights are on, so to speak, and estate planning is for when the lights go out.
Hey, that's a good way to put it. Pretty
So,
intuitive.
Yeah. Well, again, it's pretty Neanderthal. So consider the source.
Spoken like a true engineer. It was very black and white.
So I've used this relationship before on an episode of Jimmy, and that is I'm of the era of where when they taught you to drive in high school way back when, they showed these videos called Scared Straight, and it was horrible. They'd show car crashes and moms crying, fire, sirens, terrible stuff. And the idea was to make you not want to do bad things when you got behind a wheel. Well, can you, without implicating the guilty, so to speak, can you give us an example of just kind of like can you give our listeners a scared straight moment? And I'm going to guess whatever you have a bunch of examples that fit in a particular category. Can you just give us a sense for just what happens when it goes wrong?
Well, I can give you one. I can give you a few. You know, okay, estate planning and succession planning. When you're doing one, I read this book. 50 questions asked of wealthy people, and one came on the estate planning side. And this one is, you have 3 kids, and one of the one's a black sheep. He has money issues. He is, unfortunately got involved with drugs. But the other 3 are upstanding citizens. They have great values that you've passed on. And in the estate plan, the dad communicates to the family that the son, the black sheep, is going to get more money and more assets than the ones that don't. And you see that often too much. They want to protect the weakling, where, we try to emphasize to them that your estate plan doesn't match your values, and that is something that needs to be addressed. But, the being scared, too often and not, you see it with farm accidents, and, getting hit by. Well, I got one client right now. I won't say their names, but they're out of eastern Nebraska. And at the time, my best friend was in college, and his dad got hit, by during harvest. He was in his 2500, and he failed to stop at that 4-way stops that don't have stop signs out in the country, and a semi with a load of corn came on and hit him head on, and he was rushed to Omaha, and really in a really bad state, and had to get fortunately, everything turned out okay. But during that time, I can't imagine what was going through my client's head at the time. The son just went to college. He's the one that's going to come back and take over the operation. The daughter was still in high school. Mom does the books, but she doesn't farm. And the one that ran everything did. They didn't have any wills. They didn't have any trust done.
Yeah.
That's worst case scenario. And fortunately, he was able to come through it. He went to Madonna, and when I started it, they became my first client.
Oh
And
wow.
now that's when I really fell in love with farm succession and
Yeah.
estate planning. You know, now we we're helping them put entities together and to mitigate their risk. One of the biggest risks that farmers have is trucking. you know
Mm.
and if you don't think about it, is when you're on the road during harvest and you hit a school bus full of kids, and your farm owns the trucks, what do you think the parents can do? They can sue you for everything. They can go after the whole enchilada. But if you mitigate that risk by putting the trucks in their own entity and saying, VTech Trucking own bought the corn, owned the corn when they hauled. Yeah, it's more paperwork that you got to show, but they can't go after VTech Farms. They can't go
Yeah.
after the enchilada. And same thing that you look at with land. Do we put our land in a holding company and we have VTech Grain or VTech Farms rent from VTech Holdings? So we were renting the ground, releasing the ground from our own company, and our operational company is what's all they do is they market and sell grain. And then you have VTech Trucking. And so that's some of the things that we do as advisors is we come in and kind of just look at how you're set up and how things are titled. How things are titled, what ultimately saves the operation. It's a lot of work, but at the end of the day, if you hit the school bus or you get in a bad accident or something horrible happens, the sharks can't come and feed.
Yeah.
You're protected and life goes on. And, sadly, life will go on. Um, the family will get through it, but the assets are protected at the end of the day.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I'll tell you what. I think that's a pretty fantastic scared straight example. And if I was to just kind of like summarize it, it would be just the failure to have that plan. The failure to have the plan is in that case, that family they made it through it, but it had to, as you said, had to have been incredibly frightening.
Yeah, the cost of waiting is going to hurt you. You go through probate. So if you go through probate, they charge about 1% on your net worth. Attorneys, everything, because attorneys don't like going through probate. It sucks. They hate it just as much as you do. But if you did it early on and you worked through it, the families that do it really well are the ones that started early, figure it out who's going to be the heir, and communicate it to everyone. And then
Mm,
they upgrade as life happens.
yeah, that's really interesting too. Starting early and communicating who the executor is, and I guess then the other incredibly frightening example would be, oh, Grandpa, he's just plugging along, and he's just confident that when his time comes, everybody's just going to work it out. Everybody's just going to come together around the table and say, "This is mine. This is your." And boy, I can't imagine that would have. I'm sure those situations happen.
Oh, yes. I mean, when money's on the table, blood's going to be spilled.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I imagine, grandpa's last Christmas might be the family's last Christmas because there's people not talking to each other after that.
Yeah.
I've heard of that and seen that in some farm families that I know, and it's a sad situation.
Hell, we're going to have that. My family struggles with that. And, succession plan kind of go bad a little bit. When my grandfather died when I was 4, um, luckily he built a great company and it's still being run successfully today, 25 years later. However, when my grandfather died, he didn't explicitly communicate maybe why he felt it was fair for other children to get more assets than others. So that caused a bloodbath, a
Mm.
little bit. And I got an aunt that hasn't gone to uh, family events for the last 25 years.
Mm.
She's kind of disowned us because of some things that happened when my grandfather died. And
Yeah.
more importantly, you're going to see that, you know, um, like I said, land's the biggest resource,
Yeah.
biggest assets, and
Yeah.
equipment. And if there's no clear cut path um, or what are the directives in the trust on how things are going to happen, that's when family fights. Oh, let's sell everything,
Mm.
and those that don't understand or, daughters or sons that decided to leave the operation, they don't understand why farmers accept below average returns to keep the land that they have.
Mhm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. So let's kind of wrap this up on a positive note. Jimmy, give us an example of where you've worked with someone where it really, really clicked and that, you got involved in the beginning and saw it through to the end.
Um, I got a client right now that American Dream. They started feeding cattle at a young age, and I interned for them. And when I started this journey, I called on the CEO and I asked if I could come out um, and present and see if I could join their team. When myself and Mike Hutchinson took him on, we came in and kind of just started fresh. We took a fresh look at everything, and it worked out well. We helped them get some financial tools that they needed. Um, they had not addressed their estate plan for 15 years, and they got it all done when they first started, but they massively grew. We put some buy-sell arrangements in. Um, those that don't know what a buy-sell arrangement is a buy-sell is if something were to happen to me, um, who buys out my shares. So, a lot of families don't want to be in business with their business partner spouses. So there, right there is a way for us to buy out the shares so the company gets the shares and the control of the company, and then the family gets the money. From there, we helped them kind of get, build a collaborative team. We, um, we brought in a great attorney from Omaha. They themselves found a new accountant. They had a great banker already. Had a solid relationship. And then from there, after we kind of got their estate plan figured out. The next one we're kind of figuring out is the succession plan.
Mhm.
These guys are very um, large operators in the beef industry, and they, just have a lot going on. And so now kind of the next step is the succession side. And, do we look at building them a board of directors? You know, um, because the going back to the next generations, as I mentioned before, is the next generation, aka the kids, are they willing and can they take over this operation? And that's something that my clients are trying to figure out. And if not, then do we build the operation a lot like King Ranch? Do we have a board of directors that run the operation and maybe then give the family a dividend check in at the end of the year
Mhm.
if there's something there? But that one's worked out really well. We helped them find a controller in their business, and we hired within the company. And so um, that client's my baby because it's one of my larger clients that I serve, and I've just seen them progress in the last. I got them in my first year, and I'm going on 6 years, and
That's great.
and so
That's awesome.
these guys are great, and they're a tough client. Um, they're very sophisticated, smart businessmen, and they're a little trigger shy because they've had previous advisors like myself um, or insurance reps or so forth come in, sell them something, they never hear from them again. You know, they put a lot of trust and faith in that person, and then that person just makes his money and leaves. And what I have shown to my clients, especially to them, is, you know, one thing that they said, well, how can we trust you? How can we, we know you work for us, we know you work hard. And um, I said, let me show you, not tell you. And so I think for the last 6 years, I really have shown them that, you know, um, I've I'm there, even though I don't get paid, even though I've made my money. I'm still there. I still show up. I still give ideas. I now can charge for my advice if I want to, and I have started doing that. But these guys, we made the agreement, the handshake agreement when I first started. I will not charge for my advice with you, and I've stuck to that and stuff. So that operation's been impressive, and I cannot wait and see, you know, another 10 years down the road what we do with this operation. And and they are these type of guys, you'll never know. They drive, hell-dented pickups. They walk in with grease on their overalls. But I can tell you this, if they had to, they can write a fat check if they need to.
There you go.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy, this has really been a fun conversation. Andrew and I have enjoyed spending some time with you and listening to you talk about what you do and how you and your team help people to do estate planning and succession planning to keep the farm and the family and the farm as maybe the catchphrase goes, right? So, if I was just going to give a really quick recap, I think it's important for people to realize start early on all of this. As you've said, I don't think you can ever start too early. Better early than too late when the family's already going through a tough situation or people maybe don't want to talk to each other anymore. Also, understand the difference between estate planning and succession planning. They're not the same. Estate planning is who gets what, and succession planning is how do we have a plan in place to keep the operation going and to manage those assets. And finally, update that plan as you need to over time because circumstances and situations will change. So keep that in mind.
Hey,
as
Brock,
well.
and I'll just add one other thing too.
Please.
I love the comment that Jimmy made, and Jimmy, correct me if I don't get this right. The best time to plan was 10 years ago. The next best time was today. Is that more or less what you said?
Yeah, and
Yes.
And
I think that's super.
I think one last thing that they use, and I'm just going to read this. It says, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. An imperfect plan that's documented and signed beats a perfect plan that's still being debated.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yes,
That's
I like
great.
that. Very well said. Good note to end on.
Yep.
So with that, thanks again, Jimmy, and thank you as well to all of our listeners out there, both new and returning. We appreciate you taking some time to join the conversation here today, and we look forward to being back with you again in a couple of weeks. Until then, thanks for joining the herd today.